And the author of the book Addicted, I don't know if you've ever heard of this book. It's a very, very powerful book that really talks about what families go through when being evicted. It's all centered around the city of Milwaukee, but he's going to be there in person. So I'm all excited to be able to see him in person. And I'm rereading the book because I read it several years ago to refresh it. But yeah, I've been hearing a lot of positive from the community about his presence there.
Is there any scholarships for board members to attend?
No, unfortunately, we don't have any scholarships for board members to attend. This one's challenging because all of our funding for the land bank right now is CDBG. And so that's what makes that even more challenging for us.
Will it be, since it's hybrid, will it be recorded? And can we get access to that if we're able to go? Or
That's a really good
is there
question.
another fee for that? Or?
Yeah, they've recorded sessions in the past. I don't ever recall them making those sessions available after the fact. But I can follow up on that, and I'll follow up with you guys via email to let you know if the sessions will be recorded and see if that's something that they might provide to us to then maybe show it in this type of a format.
Yeah, I think it'd be beneficial if they record and we as collectively or individually do it.
Sure.
A reduced cost for the group.
I just wonder if maybe one of us could attend and get copies of everything and then we can share it, so.
Yeah. Well, like Sally mentioned, she'll be in attendance at the conference, and I do plan to attend both of these sessions.
July 11th, there was the Affordable Housing Fund information session meeting. Do we have an update on that? How did that go? Were you somebody in attendance?
Yes, we had about 36 people confirm they were going to be coming, and I think we ended up with about 25, so that's really not that bad. I thought it went really well. We actually recorded the entire session and we took minutes as well. So when that has been processed, we'll provide that on our website at www.wichita.gov/AHF. But we'll also send you guys the links if that would be a presentation you'd like to tune into. It's just shy of an hour, so not a huge time commitment there if you want to learn more.
We actually scheduled an hour for questions and they only took about 20 minutes for questions.
Yeah. But I think it was very positive and lots of good questions. And it provided an opportunity for individuals from different industries to meet one another and network a little bit too. So I think it went very well.
Good.
It was actually inspiring to see after the meeting adjourned kind of groups. It was like this builder with this developer and this, kind of powwowing in the corner. So.
That's what you want. I mean, you got to get them together. Good. How about Wichita Land Bank donation process? Next agenda item.
Yes. So watching the recording of the last meeting, it sounded like this was something that the board, as well as city real estate staff and city legal staff, talked a little bit about. And so Jeff Van Zandt followed up with me after the meeting and provided that he actually worked through kind of a 8-step process, which I've now turned into kind of like a 9-step process. Just breaking up one of the steps, it's pretty ancillary, but anyway, as to how the land bank would process on the back end and interact with the individual who might be interested in donating a property to the land bank. And so in your packet, there's actually 2 forms that I'm going to reference in the next 3 slides. The first one being the property donation form, which falls right in line with step 1. So we kind of imagine this, somebody reaching out to that Wichita Land Bank at wichita.gov email address or giving me a call indicating that they're possibly interested in donating a property to the land bank. And so we've drafted, this is just a draft, and so we're also looking for your feedback too, a sample property donation form that after that initial conversation, we would have the potential donor fill out. Once the donor fills that out, back to us, staff would then do somewhat of a visual inspection of the property, whether that be utilizing GIS or Google Earth and doing a drive-by of the property. It sounds like the city of Pittsburgh actually sometimes reach out to the potential donor and you can actually get inside the property to take pictures as well. So there would be a visual inspection that would consist of step 2. After that visual inspection, and city staff would complete what we're calling a neighborhood evaluation form. And so this form, it has a lot of different questions on it, but it's basically something that Wichita Land Bank staff do to get a better understanding of the property and then the neighborhood that it sits within. So there are a variety of different things that we have on that form. I actually have, like, for example, does the property even fall within the established central area, which is a boundary that's actually written out and explicitly listed in the ordinance that governs the Wichita Land Bank. It seems very important to this board and to our department too, to make sure that we're aware of other strategic initiatives that this land bank could implement. And so one of the evaluation questions I put on here was, do we know of any other affordable housing development that's going on proximate to the potential property? What other community resources exist? You guys can read this form, but basically just a form to give you guys a better idea of the neighborhood that the property exists within. Once that form is filled out, if this seems like a property that we would like to possibly pursue, we would probably do some initial research on the Sedgwick County site in between steps 3 and 4 related to, well, how much back taxes are actually owed on the property or applicable specials might the land bank be able to clear if it came into our possession. We might check out the Register of Deeds site. Between steps 3 and 4 is an area in this flow that I think you guys talked about having, or Jeff mentioned, and Jeff, you can chime in too. I can't see if you're unmuted or not, but if at any point you want to chime in on this too, since it's based on your initial flow, please feel free. But we talked about possibly creating a intra-departmental committee to consider properties. So, if a property had possibly been flagged by MABCD, we could have someone from MABCD check out the address and provide us whatever applicable information that we need, be able to make an informed decision. We might have we will have someone from city legal and city real estate's office, as well as staff from our office as well, looking at the property. One thing I kind of wanted to talk about today was, at what point should that interdisciplinary, I say interdisciplinary, interdepartmental committee convene? Should it be at the beginning of this process? Should it be between steps 3 and 4? How far along do we want to get down this process before we convene that committee? But if the decision is made that we're going to go ahead and order that preliminary title work and or that title commitment, if the title is clean and we don't see any significant title issues present, we would then bring that property to you for consideration. If you were then to recommend the land bank come into possession or accept the donation of the property, we would then present that donation to the city council. If the city council were then to approve the donation, we would then get the deed prepared for the donor to sign. After the donor signed the deed and deeded it over to the city, we would file that deed with the Register of Deeds and then would make that property available on our available property listing. So at this point, I'd just like to open it up to for discussion on this process and those forms.
I have a couple of questions, just on the intention of the use of the form. Would these be, am I to understand the staff would complete these forms?
So the answer is twofold. So for the first one, we'd actually have the potential donor complete that form. The next form would be one that staff would complete in the evaluation of the property and the neighborhood.
So
The
first form being the neighborhood evaluation form?
No, they must be flipped in your packet. The property donation form would be the one that the potential donor would fill out. And we'd like to get these forms in an electronic format. We just provided these to you in
Paper while they're in draft.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, did I leave anything out of your process?
No, I looking for comments, obviously, because I just kind of put this together, trying to think how it would work. The interdisciplinary committee, I thought would be something that at some point we could, as we'll develop it, but with different sets of eyes looking on a particular property, there might be something in the title commitment that jumps out to one that it might not to somebody else. And, with a group of people, kind of like the city has a purchase acquisition committee that different people look at offers on properties and stuff. And I was kind of thinking something to that line, but if we had somebody from MABCD, they could look up to see if there's any condition reports on the property, or, it would kind of help to provide that more thorough background if it becomes to the committee or the board of trustees for consideration.
I think this is a good start, Jeff. There's going to be, as you well know, a lot of other questions when you start looking at the property.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Especially when it comes to whether or not we want to take title to it, what we can do with it. So, but I think this is a very good, I'd say 30,000 foot level, just to get an idea of how much we want to dig, look into whether or not we want to accept a donation of a certain property.
Yeah, this will change dramatically as we start evaluating different properties. We're going to discover things to put in the process, and this the very fluid document, obviously, but just a starting point.
We discussed the 1819 South Market property last meeting, and I think some of the things we talked about is what's on your list. I definitely think a visual inspection is very important. And I think that has to be done. You can't do it with Google Maps. You really need to do it in person. I drove by that property, and the house just to the south of it looks like it's pretty well abandoned. The weeds are, waist high, and you just sort of have to get a feel that, okay, there's other issues in that block
Right.
that you'd want to deal with before you'd accept a donation.
And it's kind of awkward, but if we had the best lot on the block, that would be very difficult.
Together and say, what do we do about that?
Yeah.
Jeff, this was one of the issues that comes up a lot of times with property. It's the person who says they're their owner is not necessarily the only owner, or they may not be the owner at all.
Right.
You wouldn't find that out until you did a title search. Is there any way to find that out earlier rather than later?
Well, one of the things I think we'd probably do, obviously before the title commitment, would be when Logan talked about checking on taxes, we'd check the county records for ownership. And, I have access to the last document filed on the property. And so we can do a lot of that internal stuff before we get too far down the road on it. Because I see that all the time where people come in and, 28 family members have some interest in a particular property. You'd never get that title cleared. They think they might own it, but we'll be watching out for that kind of stuff.
Okay. Thanks.
City Council on June 14th had repair removal of dangerous unsafe structures, District 1. It was interesting. I went through a couple of those. One of them had 5 years of back taxes.
Yep.
I don't know, is that something, we need to start watching some of that to sort of identify if those are properties we'd be interested in, and then monitor them? Because if you got 5 years taxes, it's $1,900 taxes due on a $26,000 property, and I'm not sure it's really worth $26,000. But there are many different avenues for us to start checking properties and determining whether or not that's something we're interested in. The only concern I have, Sally, is what we just talked about, is identifying what area do we really want to focus on, because these properties are all over now.
Sure.
Yeah, and speaking to your point on the item that went on June 14th, oftentimes our department is actually made aware of those properties well in advance of the city council. Because I believe most of those are actually funded with funding from our department with the CDBG program. I don't believe emergency demolitions, ones that actually don't make the council, don't end up getting funded with CDBG. But I think most of them, we actually know about that ahead of time. I think that kind of speaks to, you know, conversations we were having a few months ago related to having to make sure we're not, that MABCD isn't funneling properties to the land bank. So I think we have to be cognizant of avoiding that, making sure that we're not coercing anyone into donating a property or selling a property.
We did have a ABCD reach out on one potential case where they thought that the owner might want to donate the property, but then they backed off. That line of communication.
Yes, and that was explicitly because the owner knew about the land bank and inquired of MABCD about the land bank first. And so then they were able to provide our contact information. Any other feedback on this discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to an update of the potential tax sale property map. So as of this morning, there are 91 remaining potential properties within Wichita that could come up on tax sale. Just an update on this. We still do not know when the tax sale will be. They're required to provide 30 days notice ahead of the sale. They are subscribed to the push notification. So we will know as soon as the public knows when that sale will be happening. But the last time we gave you guys an update on this was actually in April, and there were 124 properties remaining in Wichita. So you see how it's trickled down, just as we suspected that it would. I did go ahead and pull the map up, but I just want to kind of redirect this discussion back to the potential focus areas. We haven't really heard from you exactly which areas you'd like for us to focus in on. And I think conversations at the last meeting provided some context as to why we might or why you might not want to select a certain area at this time until you're aware of other things that our department is working on, such as the Affordable Housing Fund and repositioning the public housing portfolios, and that makes perfect sense. But we kind of wanted to show you what we might be able to do if we did have a specific area to focus in on, because we just don't have the capacity to do our due diligence on all 91 of these properties, or even just the properties within those 7 neighborhoods. So we looked at, there have been just some discussions about wanting to build off of the momentum of Rock the Block. So we did take a closer look at potential tax sale properties within the neighborhood, A. Price Woodard, with which in Rock the Block is located in, as well as the neighborhood just to the north of the Rock the Block, which is the Northeast Central. And so I'll pivot to the map in just a moment, but this snip actually shows you both of those neighborhoods. You have A. Price Woodard to the south and Northeast Central to the north. Each one of these pins, not the restaurant pins or the cemetery pin, but each of the pins that are colored in green and yellow are potential tax foreclosure properties within these 2 neighborhoods. So we only have 1 within the Rock the Block neighborhood, and then you have 1 just to the, or 2 just to the, I'm sorry, a number just to the north in the Northeast Central. The green pins are going to be parcels that are vacant. So there's no existing structure on those lots on those parcels at this time. The yellow parcels are actually ones that do have a structure. It's unknown if these properties are occupied, if they're vacant. We have not gone out and actually driven this area yet. But let me go ahead and pivot to the map. So here are those 2 neighborhoods. And what we've done is just a little bit of research using the Sedgwick County Appraiser's website. So we've denoted that, for example, this property within the Rock the Block area, the east part of the A. Price Woodard neighborhood, is 1325 North Green Street. We've identified that it's a vacant lot. We have the owner, how much is owed on taxes, and then we just put the legal description here just for, it's easier to search on the Register of Deeds website with the legal description. So we have that as well. Interestingly enough, 4 of these yellow properties are owned by the same individual. But some of these actually have quite a bit of taxes owed. For example, this is a vacant lot, 1610 North Grove, that actually owes $12,000. So we think that, if we could get in touch with the owner and make them aware of the land bank and see if they might want to donate that property to us, it could be in their financial best interest to do so. Again, we haven't gone out and done visual inspections. We don't know exactly what these properties are actually worth. We don't know if these properties are occupied. The ones that do have structure, we don't know if they're occupied or not, but we did want to show you that there are things that we could, more in-depth things that we could do to help possibly try and drum up donations. Possibly if we're thinking about maybe wanting to try and get properties off of the tax sale this year, we could possibly be too late, but we'd at least be able to start doing some due diligence if we had a specific area to look within.
Aside from looking at the tax foreclosures, part of that neighborhood evaluation is what other vacant parcels might be there, or blighted parcels where we might want to do some additional outreach, even though they're not necessarily on tax rolls, they're not tax foreclosure.
Something like that, I'm not sure you pay $12,000, you wouldn't want to eliminate all the taxes, pay a split deal, as far as thinking out loud. $5,000 or $6,000 for a lot.
We didn't dig into, what that 12, it seems like really high taxes on a vacant lot, even over 4 years. So there may be more into that. There probably was a structure. It may have been taken down by MABCD. And so all those costs have then been applied as a special assessment. So like I said, because we haven't been able to go out and do the due diligence, because we really need to give us a target area. We are really strapped staff-wise. We're challenged in hiring folks. We've had a couple of recruitments that we put out a couple of times to fill 2 key positions for this type of work, and are not getting the candidates we need. And so we just don't have the capacity to do a deep dive into the whole area.
I would move that those 2 areas would be the area that we focus on at this time, and just go from there. I think that's an area of need. And as Wes just said, it's a great location. I think we could make a difference. So I would propose that staff go ahead and start doing research in that area, and let's sort of come up with a game plan between now and whenever we get notified that the county's going to have a tax sale. Does anybody else have thoughts or comments on that? Agree on that, or?
I would agree, and I think if you look at your low-lying fruit, that's like just the items that you mentioned. And I think if you talk with Mennonite Housing or Habitat for Humanity, they would probably buy those vacant lots. So is it better for them to communicate with the potential seller, or is it, on this one case, if he says, hey, I just don't want to pay my taxes, I'll give it to you, then are we relieved of those taxes when it goes to the bank and bank?
So taxes that are just your basic property taxes, and any specials due to condemnation, board ups, those actually do just melt away when it comes to the land bank. The one piece that doesn't is if they have specials related to public improvements. So if there are special, and I hate to say it, where we're looking for specials related to public improvements. Be aware of that and watch for it. I just don't think we'll see it much, but that's the only caveat within the statute. Those do not go away and change the land bank. They are put on hold and transferred to the then and owner if it were public improvement special assessments.
One of the things I think is, I don't know that this would actually happen, but there's enough properties in those areas that there's decent neighborhoods. I think it would be noticed. We wanted to
Right.
change.
Kind of a targeted investment versus the shotgun approach.
That's in 2008. $8,000 was probably demolition of that building.
Do we have any seed money in our account to where we can make offers on some buildings and say, hey, we're willing to pay this? And we talked to somebody that once again, I'll just reference Mennonite Housing or say, hey, would you guys be interested in purchasing this for this amount? And we kind of come in and negotiate it and sell it to them. Get the process going instead of waiting till things go to a tax sale.
Oh, we definitely want to try and get ahead of the tax sale, because that's part of the reason we wanted to know where you wanted us to look, is so we could do some outreach and go, hey, you can avoid this going to tax sale. Here's an opportunity, to possibly have a resolution that works kind of on both sides. The challenge with the seed money is we're using CDBG funds for the majority. So we have very little any other type of funding, just enough funding to be able to do things like the title search and those type of expenses, which means if we're purchasing a property, you're talking 90 days ahead, because we're going to have to get through environmental review and all of the federal requirements. So that's what makes that very, very challenging with the funding we have.
So if we, just to take it a step further, so if we had a buyer for it before we even purchased it, but we're not needing, we just need to be able to get it to closing and then go to another closing. Thinking in those terms, and I don't know if that's possible with the city processes. But that eliminates the need for significant amount of capital, just enough to keep things. It's not like we're doing 40 of them. Might be just half a dozen.
I do know there is nothing in the statute. There's nothing that says that it has to be in the land bank for any particular length of time. But we haven't gone through this yet and worked yet with the county on what it's, their processes for getting those cleared on their side. So I know our law department's been talking with the county too, to try and work out some of that. But definitely, I absolutely see it. And I know, we've talked with Mennonite and with Habitat, and, Habitat is very clear and says everyone knows what they're doing there. So if they own property, they think they're going to get rich, because they think that if they hold out long enough, Habitat's going to come in and offer them a huge sum of money. And I'm sorry to say, they're just really that's not going to happen.
I think that goes to the issue of what you were talking about. If the city approaches, they're a different entity than Habitat, because they know what Habitat does. They know they want the lot, they want to buy it out at that price and hopefully get it. Say, well, doesn't make one. I think a city entity would have a chance of getting the property. And I think we just have to avoid the perception that we bought that Habitat from our favorite partner. That's not. I think we made a deal to go out and do that. That's a different.
It wouldn't be something where that, we may know that they're working in that area. There's great interest in our nonprofit developers in acquiring properties in that area, but it isn't one where we've made an arrangement ahead of time to say, we're going to get this on behalf of you.
Right. So speaking kind of to your point, Marvin, I think we'd have to be careful about having those conversations ahead of doing due diligence or ahead of acquiring or accepting a donation. I think those conversations might have to happen possibly after the property has been acquired.
Why is that?
Just because I think, maybe I'm off base here, but we want to avoid the perception that the city's acquiring a property for any specific developer or owner.
Afraid of it.
To make sure we're being transparent and fair in the process by which we
Make properties available.
That's because they don't want to be accused of that, and that's part of the problem of trying to get this stuff done.
But I think on something like this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume you'd go in and say, we'll just eliminate the taxes on this property. You're willing to deed it over, and if we can get clear title.
Yeah.
And then we go to our developer partners and say, we have this lot, we're accepting bids. You got 30 days to get a bid in place. We'll provide free and clear title, and tell me how much you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and those partners look at the monitoring. Anyway.
Yep.
Like anybody could.
And then at least you don't have the, oh, well, we're giving everything to Habitat or, but the biggest deal here is if I own this lot, you said I'm going to go pay your taxes for you.
And I guarantee you, when we make them available for purchase, it's going to be more than just the bottom line, right? That application is also going to include, purpose and intent. This is for affordable housing. So no matter who, if we're using the CDBG funds, the end goal and how are they going to ensure that it is, created for the affordable housing purpose. So we'll be able to take into consideration more than just who gave us the biggest number.
Sally, is there any way we can do it other than CBG?
If there was funding, sure. Sure.
CIP as a category for neighborhood. Whatever, used to, neighborhood program type, human structure, clean up. That's still the case in CIP.
I am not aware that that is the case in the CIP for this type.
Like neighborhood services, so I don't forget what it's called.
We fund the neighborhood resource centers out of CDBG, so.
What happened, summer. Since 2008,
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
since 2008, what was CIP renamed? So I just wondered. Situation. Not the only source. Yeah.
Not that I'm aware that there's a category in the CIP for, you're talking like neighborhood reinvest or revitalization fundings in the funding in the CIP, not related to the land bank.
We could tie that neighborhood down a little bit. All right. Incentives to it. To make it more attractive to developers, builders, which we ought to do as soon as possible.
And we do see that, that need, so not from the land bank side, but from the affordable housing fund side. So we did dedicate some CDBG for public improvements and infrastructure that will marry up with those two pilot areas for that same reason, right? So if we need to make improvements to sidewalks in neighborhoods, or if there's a drainage issue, we have some funding to make that happen. I mean, it could obviously, because like we've said, there could be land bank activity happening in those pilot areas where that could then benefit again. But
Question, if we get a property to taxes, specials, pluses for something. Well, you sell that property, who values tax purposes out of the land bank to some developer or whatever.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Depends on what you sold it. And they do the same appraisal.
We have, say, 5,000, say there's 7,500. So if we sell it for 70, what's its value of it? That's the taxable tax, correct?
We'd probably have to ask legal on that.
I think it has to stay down until the process. That's the value of it. Wouldn't want it higher than what we sold to it. Because that's an incentive.
If you sell it to them for X number of dollars, do a valid appraisal questionnaire, that's what the county's gonna look at. And it's an arm's length transaction. So I don't know. I would sure argue if it came in higher.
Somebody says, well, it's actually up to 10,000. No, it's only 7,500, 7,500.
Okay, I have a motion on the table that we will look at the two, I don't off the top of my head.
North Central and A Price Woodard.
Yeah, A Price Woodard and Northeast Central, thank you. Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed, same sign. I think we've identified our first areas of concentration.
Thank you.
Can we pursue those two examples of those vacant lots? Is that something that we can take an action on that?
I would like staff to review those and start filling out the forms and start thinking about what is the pertinent information that we need to then sit down, Marvin, and say,
Start with something.
yes,
Gets us all thinking of how it works.
Your action today starts us actually going out into the.
Go out and talk to these people and see, hey, we can go before tax foreclosure. This is what we can do.
And we'll see what else we're running.
yeah, I'd like to see multiple recommendations before next meeting. And my thought is they send them out ahead of time so we really have a chance to look at them, drive by the properties and understand what we're dealing with. And we make a good decision based upon.
I think you guys, because we're picking these two spots, you guys have a good you understand that community. So that should lend yourself some time. Shouldn't take as much time for zeroing in.
We also don't pretend that we know it as well as those who live in those communities. So we need to do some outreach, some additional outreach in those neighborhoods.
Sure. Good question.
I want to just go back to process then. So when it comes back, these 4 or 5 potential properties or whatever, you'll be giving us this form
That's
to evaluate?
right. Now, if we track with this process specifically, we would need them to actually offer to donate the property to us or to sell the property to us, and then we complete that neighborhood evaluation form after the fact. Now, what we can do for these, like, we could do that evaluation of the tax foreclosure, do that neighborhood evaluation form first to get an idea of which ones you might want to pursue further, if you'd like.
I think that would be
Makes
helpful.
sense.
Yeah, I think that's what you have to do. We're not at a point that we know somebody wants to donate it to us. We're sort of taking the offensive side here and we're
Okay.
going out to the neighborhoods and looking at ones that have potential tax foreclosure sales or vacant lots and identifying whether or not those would fit into what the land bank program is.
Sure. So we'll complete neighborhood evaluation forms for all of the pins and before this meeting. One thing we had talked about with Jeff and then Sally and I, we could also draft letters to all of these individuals. We have the addresses of the owners as reported on. Just to make them aware that the land bank exists, basically saying that, we're aware that, you owe taxes in this amount, not asking them to donate or trying to coerce them or anything like that, but just making them aware that this is an avenue that they could use or just educating them about it, if that makes sense.
Is that something we want to do before we have a chance to look at them to educate us or not?
My only concern is a timing, because I'm expecting that foreclosure to be announced anytime. And that, otherwise, yes, I would say if we had more time, I would absolutely say it.
I'd say send the letter out.
Yeah, it can't hurt. I mean, because we're not making an offer is our point, can we get them to at least engage in a conversation?
And I would post it as a new program, new opportunity,
Yes.
challenge. Should you please contact us? Not like the tax bill or something.
Right.
Somebody can look
Say,
at the tax bill.
yeah, I'm not gonna have those tax bills, I'm not gonna use this either.
Okay, well, we'll work with the legal department to draft the letter and get those sent out to all the pins in those 2 neighborhoods. And then we'll come with the completed neighborhood evaluation forms at the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
Great, that's all we have for you today. So now we'll move it to discussion, other business.
I guess the only thing I wanted to say was, again, that 1819 South Market property that last time had that medical lien, which I don't quite understand, but there's a cloud definitely on the title. But it was interesting driving by and seeing the property right next to it, like it vacant. These were tall. There were some pride of ownership across the street, so I mean, I really see opportunities. And it's going to probably have to be working with the neighborhoods whenever you find property. Say, okay, Marvin, what do you want to do? This is a house right across the street from you, and we might be able to help, but what are we going to make sure that it gets done right the next time? So, yes, Kathy.
On that issue, did Jeff indicate he has an update or he hasn't been able to find time to start that process? He was going to contact the state. And I don't know if he's still on the line or not.
Yeah, I tried to find somebody and I could not find anybody that would know the process for releasing a lien for a land bank or anything like that. I didn't put a tremendous amount of time in it, but I was finding a pretty dead end on the other side. I could keep trying a little bit, but I didn't come up with anything by now.
Yes, the title company.
Jeff, did you talk to a title company?
No, I did not. I tried to call the state to find out about that lien, and I wasn't able to really find anything. And I'm sure it's, if I had been a little more time to have some more persistence, I might have found the right department, but I didn't come up with anything.
I would think as long as First Security First has been in the business as much as they do statewide, they've probably run into it. So
Okay,
So Jeff, we'd like to leave that on your plate to keep
that's
working
fine.
your mind.
That one's unique too. Aside from the Medicaid lien, the ownership issue of property still showing in the, who thinks they're the current owner's deceased ex-wife's ex-husband's name. You know, it's just a prime example of one of those kind of nightmares. And the
Is this
Medicaid.
property in Arkansas or what? That's a,
I'm sorry?
sorry.
Is this Arkansas or what?
Oh, I know.
I remind everybody, this is recorded.
Yeah.
How long?
The gentleman on South Market, how he found out about the land bank, how he started on it.
He actually didn't indicate how he found us. He did note that his property was flagged by code enforcement. So maybe doing research on the city's website. I could find out. I can give him a call back and find out how. And maybe he mentioned it. That was a very long conversation about 2 months ago. So I don't exactly remember all the details, but he did not indicate how he found out about the land bank.
And the reason why I asked is just, while we're gonna primarily focus on these two neighborhoods, I'm not sure if the general public is quite aware of how this land bank operates and some of the benefits that some of these owners would have if they decide to donate to land bank. And so I don't know what you guys' opinions are, if there's a way we could
Ramp up
kind
community.
of be more out there and informative of
Sure.
what we do. And while we may get nowhere, people just make applications or something, at least gives us a general idea of how this process will work. If it's in our best interest, or maybe, properties out there where it's one and done, hopefully, or it gives us, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that
I don't know, I'm sorry, that was very long-winded, but,
Fine.
that's kind of my thoughts, I guess, because this gentleman found out about it in some way. I wonder how many other people benefit.
right after you send out your letter, I'm gonna send out letters. There's snakes in the neighborhood.
Well, something, even as long as it's in the established central area, it might be something where
Well,
we could find interest in, even if it's just one at a time in area.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. We can definitely be more proactive with our communication and education surrounding the land bank and the fact that it is brand new and that we are getting ramped up and things like that. We can work with our communications team to put together a strategy and then start actually posting, I don't know, social media.
Yeah, social media or something
Yeah.
of that nature, post on the website or.
I think the sooner we can get out positive information about it and have even testimony from somebody that's been
Mhm.
involved,
Yeah.
then people will relate to it as being positive. It won't be pushback, because some people ask, well, what do you have heard? Oh, you have to choose. That's, try to eliminate as much of that.
My only concern, I've had the Eagle reach out to me 2-3 times now, and I've said, we are not ready for that. So I want to make sure we're ready. We know what we're going to do. We know the process. And then I think we talk to communication. We have the mayor do it on his little update, and then we have the Business Journal and paper, both. Let's talk about it. Let's get our details down first before.
We really need to get that donation form done and online. I know I gave a few comments to you there, Sally, if anybody else has, because if we can really get that a final product and before, because you're absolutely right. I think we talked about it at the last meeting. We want to tell people, but we don't want to tell people and then have the staff deluged, because what she just committed to doing for y'all in a less than a month period of time, looking at all those properties in those 2 areas is a lot. And so we want to focus on that and maybe put off the communication till maybe another month or 2.
Proven records, something we can show for.
I think we need to understand it better before.
Yeah.
I wanted to also add that with the upcoming Kansas Housing Resources Conference, we could actually get some takeaways from what Ms. Goring is going to present and then have some examples. Yep, so at that time, it'd probably be better for putting that letter together with some.
She's actually shared with us all of her documents.
We modeled the documents we drafted for you today off of documents they provided to us.
You email those drafts out to us, say we're on.
Yes.
Any other business or discussion? I think it's been a very good meeting, made some good progress.
Process for just a minute, because I was kind of over here in the back, and I may not have heard everybody, but I thought I heard that, you know, for the next meeting, you'll get information on all this, and you said, send it out in advance so we have time to drive around. And so just, you know, instead of like the night before the packet comes out, what is a reasonable amount of time for y'all have time? I mean, this is like what, a Wednesday? If we get the agenda packet out 48 hours in advance of the meeting, does that give you time to run?
I'd love to see the properties week to 10 days before the meeting. It's just, you never know what's gonna.
Well, other things come up whether.
Yeah.
I was gonna shoot to try and send it to you in about 2 weeks so that you had about 2 weeks to get out in front of it. And then as far as the agenda packets, we were late this time. We're required to send them out for our bylaws 5 days before. And so I was late on that one.
I'm not as worried about the agenda package, but this information on houses, I'd really like to see it the Monday, the week before, or the Friday before that, because that would give us plenty of time to look. I think we sort of know what the agenda is going to be, so I'm not too worried about that coming out 3 days.
A week and a weekend, and if you're gone for the weekend, then you've still got, you know, 4 or 5 evenings to go do it. Yeah.
That makes sense.
You know, process wise, Logan, another thing you might think about is on your agenda, have every time, you always put the next meeting date time on there. That way, the last thing you do at your meeting is everybody can kind of look at their calendar and go, yeah, I have a conflict, or yep, it's on my calendar. Hey, how come it's not on my calendar? And I just hope that will help us with our quorum issues a
I think
little.
usually, I think we have that on there.
Blocked off for that.
I don't remember. I don't.
Okay, the next land bank,
PowerPoint.
next land bank meeting's on the 10th.
But I'll include it on the future agendas too.
Anybody have any conflicts on the 10th next month?
I do. I'll be in Arizona. That's all right.
Why would you go to Arizona on August 10th?
So what my.
Cheap conference
Cheap
or something.
conference.
What are they, crazy Arizona?
You gonna come out?
No, last time I was in Arizona conference, it was in August, flew at 10:30 in the morning.
So Wes will be absent from the August meeting. And is anybody else?
It was awful.
Everybody else be here?
I don't have any planned absence.
Well, Wes, before you leave, why don't you and I have a conversation? You have a chance to look over the properties and then we could share that.
I just want to, I hate to belabor, but if we're going to be looking at information, these 2 sheets I think are really helpful. But it didn't have any of the stuff that you showed up here about how split the size, bedroom, bath, all that. Will there be something, this tells me about the neighborhood that it's in. And this tells me if there are liens or anybody else has access to it. But I don't know that I have anything about the property itself. Am I?
That'd be the basic map.
Well, I think what you do is you print out the county information. That has all the square footage, the land base, and send that with it. And then also the back taxes, you know, what those amount to. I think you add that information in there, that'll help.
Yeah, we can do that. I'll kind of make a hybrid form, like a neighborhood and property evaluation form, and have all that information, maybe on a 2-pager or something.
Or even if it's just the links,
Okay, yeah, that works.
I don't want to make a whole lot of extra.
You know, the only other question I have,
Where you could be just uploading the photos, we'd have a look at property.
Is that something you guys would be interested in? Instead of having it come in via email, we could set up a shared OneDrive folder with each of you, and then we could drop meeting materials and things like that into it.
you just, Yes, whatever's easiest for you guys.
Okay,
So if we start emailing you stuff with lots of pictures in it, it's likely.
it could be too big for the email.
It fills it up pretty quick.
Dropbox is fine.
We can send you an email that says we've uploaded on 123 Main Street. Here's a link to the,
Yeah, and I heard you say Dropbox. We can't use Dropbox in the city,
Okay,
unfortunately.
yeah, unfortunately,
okay, whatever you're talking about.
Okay,
kind of thing.
As long as you guys just give us a notification
yeah,
of dates.
yeah, and we can help you get into it if you have issues.
Okay, I got one more question. How much should we start looking at properties without addresses? And, I mean, because this is a public meeting. And if I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I find out you're starting to talk about my property, then the price changes, or the negotiation changes. Is that a concern to anybody?
It was mine because you're trying to get property, have it held up, trying to get it because somebody knows that you're looking at it. That defeats the purpose.
We could use the county's PIN number. It's really easy to use that.
We have our own number. I think we come up with a number that we have the key for. We can look at properties, but maybe delete the address and the legal description and just look at the general, just the thought. I mean, I don't know how, I know people learn very quick and,
We'll just attend the meeting, see what's coming up.
but if all we're doing is talking property one or property two, it may, they're gonna have to dig a little bit to get the rest of the information. But I just,
And we're not trying to take advantage of it anymore.
No.
What we're trying to do though is make a determination as early in the game as possible as to whether or not that property might be available. And go about it in a quiet way. As soon as they know you're looking at somebody's. Kind of defeats it.
I want to be transparent, but also want to be smart about it. And real estate, the rules are a little bit different. So,
Jeff, could you chime in on maybe like open meeting, open records requirements, things like that? Because if doing this could possibly just generate a bunch of Cora requests that we would then have to divulge that information possibly anyway.
We would in a Cora request, that's correct. We could code it in a meeting, but if somebody wanted to see what that was, we'd have to turn that over in a Cora request.
I mean, I don't have a problem with that, Jeff, because we know who the person is requesting the Cora, right?
Correct.
I don't know, you might think about it at the city level. I just,
One last thought on this other parcel that we always talk about with the house on it. Is that something is that a viable property if you can get the lien released?
Say that again.
That one property that has that house on it, that they're willing to donate it.
my concern's the structure, foundation. They said the foundation's in bad shape, and it's the old cinder block, that foundation, I'm a
I
little.
think our thoughts at the time was it, with the building itself would have to come down.
Okay.
And the lot then is made available for a new.
House next door was probably built 20 years ago where this house.
I guess where I was gonna head with that is if we felt it was worth $10,000. My experience with lien releases, the only person that can release it is the holder. And if it's a hospital that has 50,000 on it, you can tell them, hey, I'll give you 5,000. That's 5,000 more than you're gonna get. This is what it is.
It's off their books.
A lot of times they'll just take that because they'd rather have 5. If it goes to bankruptcy, then they get nothing. So that's just a thought. We can spend time trying to find out if we know who it is. You work the phone call and say, here's the deal, it's not worth anything. We're willing to give you 5. If he's willing to give it up, we can get that for 5,000.
The lien, that lien is actually the state and Medicaid. So it is the state who holds the lien, and that's why Jeff's been trying to get hold of the state.
And actually
Yeah.
on the actual document that I found on the Register of Deeds website, the name is escaping me. It's KDHE is who it is.
that same conversation. It's just not worth 50,000.
It's, and that's why Jeff's trying to get a hold of
Maybe we ought to get the owner to deed it over to KDHE, then let.
Yeah.
Okay, we've been here for 1 hour.
Perfect.
Any other comments, questions?
Me,
If not, I move we're adjourned. Second.
second.
All in favor, say aye. Thank you, everybody.
So, this is my favorite kind of. I stole it from someone else. So, yeah. Stole it from Michelle. She knows I did. Probably. Yep.
Tia, is that correct?
Okay, yes, that is. Like, wow.
That's a pretty name.
When you get your whole name, you're, man, I just got here. What did I do?
Jack stayed.
Making progress.
Yeah.
Just be nice to get one under our belt. Water in the house. And I wish we had some money to work with.
That's the difficult part,
I
right?
don't know how you can do anything. Just,
Waiting.
Someone got
you know, when they use an acronym where they get the funds from.
Here, what do you do about that? Why not? You own it, you do. Now you can't, now they're
They've been,
They have money.
Feels like chaos.
sound like they had money
I know.
purchased. It sounds like they have money enough to do
We're gonna lean on it, look straight at
the
that.
administrative research,
Yeah.
This is delete the lead.
but not actually to go out.
This is know your property.
Yeah.
Credit. I mean, $100,000 line of credit, a line of credit from bank. Maybe they would give us an interest rate.